We've got games, we've got GameCore, and a new controller. There's a lot to talk about. It might be Monday, but the news is coming pretty darn quick. Microsoft announced today that, hey, that game event we've been talking about for July, well, it's happening July 23rd at 9 a.m. Pacific time or noon Eastern time, or, go ahead and do the translation into your own time zone, if you will. We'll be streaming on Xbox, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and obviously not Mixer. But there should be a lot coming in that event. It's going to be, I think, primarily focused on Microsoft's first-party titles. Obviously, we're going to be seeing more Halo. I think that's pretty much a given at this point. But Microsoft has a lot of studios up its sleeve, around a dozen or so, who have been working on games for its next-generation stuff. And, well, it looks like that's going to be coming out around the end of July, the 23rd. Now, I know the big topic of the day, or the past month it has been Lockhart. Are we going to see that? I don't think that's going to be on the agenda. It's still looking like that's potentially an August release. That being said, everything is fast and fluid inside the Microsoft world. If they wanted to pivot it to that event, I'm sure they could, but it's not expected on the agenda as of today. So keep your eyes and ears locked for that as we hear more. So there was some Assassin's Creed video gameplay that was leaked, and so we'll see if that's part of the agenda as well. It wouldn't surprise me. That video actually got pulled off the internet, and so although you can still find it in various dark corners of the web, there are other things to talk about too. Remember that Xbox game developer stuff that leaked about 2 weeks ago that confirmed Lockhart's existence? Not that we needed any further really information relating to that. Well, I've gotten to look at it a little bit more in depth than what we just got in those brief screenshots, and here's what you need to know. First off, there's a couple things on the agenda. First, this is the June Game Developer Release, or GDK, and what this is the toolkit that Microsoft gives to game developers to help them build titles for their next generation stuff, and it's filled with a lot of very, very, very technical information, including how GameCore is going to operate, quite literally bugs and features that are not working, and some rough general guidance about shipping dates, and not necessarily shipping dates to the console, but when things are going to materialize and be usable from a developer perspective. Couple things to keep in mind. This June release, according to Microsoft's documentation, which you can see right here, is the first official GDK that developers will be able to use to actually ship a game to retail. You can see that along the bottom line there, and you'll notice it says Scarlet. And if you remember, there was some mild controversy, or whatever you want to call it, way back when Phil Spencer, when initially announcing Scarlet, said it was consoles, plural, and then it became Scarlet Console. Well, in the documentation, it's very clearly Scarlet Consoles with plural, and so make for that for what you will, but it's definitely listed as plural in there, and that's documentation very clearly does talk about Lockhart profiling. Lockhart is the actual spelling mistake in there, but it's Lockhart profiling, and that is the primary focus of GameCore. If you've been trying to understand what GameCore is, it's a new development framework for the next generation Xbox consoles, and what it allows developers to do is to use a universal kind of set of development toolkit and then optimize it for the specific SKU, and this is going to be done through a feature called profiling. That is why we saw Lockhart profiling. There's also Anaconda profiling, and GameCore is at the heart of this functionality to make it significantly easier to build one game and then target it at the different profiles of if you will, of the different consoles. That is where GameCore lives, and that's the design functionality to make it much, much easier for developers to build a game for GameCore, and then also it also brings the development much closer to that of a traditional Windows game, if you will. And so GameCore is moving along, and the fact that this GDK, which includes GameCore functionality, is saying, hey, look, you can use this to ship, means that GameCore is steaming full ahead, or full steam ahead, which would be the proper way to say whatever. It's a Monday. Is in good shape. Now, it's not a perfect shape. There are certain features and functionality that is not going to be listed or functional at the time, including a multi-process feature, but don't really fret and think that means, hey, multi-process games can't run in GameCore when there is a workaround listed in the documentation. It's just something that Microsoft is saying this is not going to be available at launch, but it will be soon after. You got to remember, these are launch titles, and they are living in a very fluid world of what features will and will not be coming down the pipeline. So that is kind of the big stuff that's in there. There's not a whole lot of like consumer grade material. I read the entire documentation, and it is very technical, and most of it is just like, hey, there's a bug here, there's a bug there, this feature doesn't work, this functionality might not be available until we patch this feature. That being said, it does tell us that GameCore is still alive, active, and well. Not that there was any doubt about that, and that it's in what seems to be good shape, but Microsoft, according to this documentation, has a lot of work to do before launch, but they do have some time. Now, speaking of other things that might interest you from a consumer perspective, there's a company called 8BitDo or 8BitDo, and they've created this thing. Look at this thing. So they actually worked with Microsoft, and this is a controller that is being explicitly designed to use, I believe, with Android devices, although I'd have to imagine that it'll eventually come to iOS at some point. But you can see it's just a nice, cute little controller that is going to work really, really well with xCloud games on your mobile device. Now, here's another shot of it that gives you a little bit better profile look of it. It reminds me very much of like an SNES, a Super Nintendo controller, like that same functionality. But the important thing I think to keep in mind here is look at that profile. Look how thin and slim it is. And this thing would work really, really well with xCloud gaming on the go. I mean, I'm actually pretty intrigued. It will also come with that clip that you see there at the top, and I believe it charges over USB Type-C, and it looks just like an authentic Xbox controller. Now we'll have to wait and see once we get our hands on one about the fit and finish, about how, does it live up to that high bar that the Xbox controller has set. But the fact that they're working with Microsoft on this makes me think that yes, this absolutely will maintain that high bar. And so I'm pretty intrigued. I really like the profile of this thing, because we all know how large the Xbox controller is. It's not a knock against the Xbox controller. Heck, it's not a Duke, but it's not the easiest thing to toss into a bag. This controller right here would be very easy to toss into a bag. Although the only thing that concerns me potentially, and this is minor, is that see how far those analog sticks stick above? I'd love it if you could pop those things off and then make it so that those won't get like stuck, like pinched or something in your bag. Minor detail aside, I think this looks pretty darn good. It's going to work with Android, as you can see there on the compatibility. I'd have to think they're bringing this to iOS, because that's a huge base for Microsoft and for just selling peripherals in general. But right now, only Android. But I think that's a nice looking little. I mean, just look at it. I think it's a cool addition. So there you go, guys. We've got a gaming event coming July 23rd. We're going to get a lot of good looks at what Microsoft is doing here. I'm hoping that they're bringing their A game, or more specifically the AAA game, to this event and showing off some real gameplay, not some cinematic footage. Although I think that's a given. We will hear that along with world premiere and exclusive. Those will probably be tossed around quite a bit as well. We've got some game core updates. It's looking good. It's making good progress. And then we've got this controller. For a Monday, that's not too bad.